the issue is the Sharia that involves how you deal with non-Muslims, how you deal with laws of things I was talking to you about human rights and women's issues, etc. Those need to be reformed, and if anything, separated completely from religion and discussed based on universal human rights, discussed based on the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and especially based on our own constitutional principles and Bill of Rights. But I separate those things. And to me, I can have my will and testament based on the way I believe God intended it for me in the Quran, but I choose to do that, and I can enact that in a civil court. It doesn't have to be in a Sharia court. And so the separation of mosque and state to me is about maintaining my religious identity, maintaining the laws that I choose, but not having society dictate that to me. Political Islam is multifaceted. Political Islam is the general movement in society to create opportunities and systems of governance that allow the infiltration of the legal part, the cultural part, and governmental part, and educational parts. So that's really what political Islam is, and it's really involved in the collectivization of Muslims as one unit. And I think also that, when we argue healthcare, for example, you saw on the Hill here a couple weeks ago, some Muslims get together and say, this is the Muslim approach to the healthcare, and this is why we support universal healthcare. I read that and I was personally offended. I was the head of the Arizona Medical Association, and I never once talked about any policies that I did in healthcare or recommended to any of the congressmen. We've talked to Shadegg and others before about many things, and Franks. I never told them, oh, by the way, this is Muslim, so this is why I'm telling you that I'm for this or against that. Not to mention that you could be for healthcare for as many people as possible, but still feel that free markets are the better way to do that rather than through socialized systems. So this is where Islamists or political Islam hijacks the ideas, and you'll see this actually in the Brotherhood in Egypt. And Hamas, they will enact social programs, hospitals, build schools, and create government as the nanny state, and then turn around and have social rules that are very far to the right. And this is why in America, they're still trying to understand, well, where do the Muslim groups fit in this? They're far to the right on family issues, and they're far to the left on governance as far as welfare and entitlement programs. It's because, look at the Middle East. The Islamist groups, political Islam, is about social programs, entitlement programs when it comes to governance, if you look at the Muslim Brotherhood positions, and far to the right on family issues and those types of laws.
Okay, I want to ask him to refer to one more thing, but I'm also going to take your questions, and then we can just do it all at once. Dr. Jasser, can you also speak a little bit about, Mr. Ellison had said that CAIR has denounced terrorism, and so I want you to respond a little bit about that, like to what extent have they actually renounced terrorism, and what is the problem that you see in organizations like CAIR and ISNA as political Islamists, I guess. And so, yes, can you? Did you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to ask. I'm going to have them ask their questions as well. And we'll just do it all at once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it's okay. You can sit. Just mention your name.
I'm just doing it so we can record it.
Right, I understand. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Jasser, for coming here. My name is Alejandro Butel. I'm with the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I wanted to, in the spirit of the free market of ideas, just actually go back to your original remarks regarding issue of terrorism, recruitment, radicalization, on two issues. First was the relationship between internet and ideology, and then second was to clarify regarding political Islam. Now, regarding the first one with the internet and ideology, it seems like you put a primacy on the internet and ideology spreading, but what it seems like in terms of the terrorism literature is that the factors leading to radicalization and even violent behavior seem to be a bit more complex, and it's much more than just simply the presence of ideology, but rather that social networks are really what get people to join. and then that the internet is what really helps to spread and recruit people. However, a recent report from the UK by a noted think tank, the International Center for Study of Radicalization, had noted that it seems to be that's not the case, that it may reinforce people who may have already been convinced. However, in terms of actually those who have joined, it doesn't seem to have much effect. And as for the second issue regarding political Islam, it seemed like the characterization was rather monolithic and that there didn't seem to be a bit of nuance. And my reference to this is actually Graham Fuller, who was former vice chair of the National Intelligence Council, 30-year CIA veteran, and speaks 7 languages with extensive experience in the Muslim world. And so in his book on political Islam, he seems to denote that there's a large spectrum of individuals. And so I'm just wondering what your opinion is of his analysis, and if there's any possible avenues of engagement, because he seems to take a different tact. And then just on a final small note, you had mentioned before the organization that had said the Muslim position on healthcare. That might have been a reference to MPAC. Just as a clarification, sir, we didn't take any specific position on healthcare saying what government officials should or should not do, but rather we were making a commentary on the nature of the debate about it, saying that what's being thrown around right now is just mostly ad hominem attacks, and that proposals in terms of whether free market or state subsidies haven't really been put forth, but rather it's more about such and such a person is Hitler or such and such a person is bad. Myself being someone a bit more free market oriented, I look at the debate though and still see that, you know, there's room for compromise on both sides. But in terms of the actual substance of the debate, we found it to be problematic, not necessarily that we took a position. Thank you very much, brother.
Thank you. And there was one more question over here. Is there still a question?
Are you sure you don't want to take that separately? Because it does seem like a lot to mix together.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually would prefer to ask separately.
Well, we have about 7 minutes left, so it's now or never. But Zuhdi, he'll do a good job of it, I promise.
Okay.
He'll be able to answer both.
Dr. Miriam Mendelsohn, I'm an independent researcher in the area of counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, and counterradicalism. I actually have a theological question for you, Doctor. Putting oneself in the shoes of the religious Muslims who feel a sense of responsibility to what they see as being God's law, divine law, how would you ask them to distinguish between their responsibility to carry out commandments such as the proscription on alcohol or the need for modest dress or the need for prayer or for charity, to distinguish that from what they see as their equal responsibility to carry out punishments, if that would be the case, or to censure those who are departing from or threatening what they see as the stability of the community. I can't call forth real specifics, but those laws that you would like to see reformed, they may see as much of a responsibility upon them as you see the laws about alcohol, etc. So how would you ask them to distinguish? Thank you very much.
Okay. Here we go. First of all, thank you. CAIR, denouncing an act is not good enough. And if you wonder why we have a PR problem, it's because Americans are smart. They see that if you denounce the act but you don't denounce the individual by name or the organization, that you become an apologist. And therefore, simply denouncing the act of terror but then saying that Hamas has justified, they've been persecuted, they've been this and that, it becomes an apologetic and you're making excuses. This is like Qardawi, who said that he made a fatwa against terrorism but then said except in Israel and Iraq. I'm sorry, when my mom taught me about not stealing, she didn't say, well, except if you're really poor. I don't remember that. So if you're teaching universal principles, you can't make exceptions. And if you want to be a moral person of courage, you have to be able to label groups by name and say that Hamas is a terrorist organ, not only because the government says so, but because they proudly advocate for that in their charter, and they advocate for that on television and in their principles. So it's very different from condemning. Yes, they condemn terror. And actually this year in February 2009, CAIR did finally list Al-Qaeda as a terrorist organization. And now a few weeks ago, they've identified Hamas, I think, in a sentence or two. But I'm sorry, once somebody forces you to say something, it's much less genuine than it is if it comes from your heart. As a Muslim, I'll tell you that.